Now, the Labour Party wants to give the Fair Work Commission more power to order pay rises for workers in female-dominated industries such as childcare. The announcement was made at the ALP's conference in Adelaide, but Federal Minister for Women, Kelly O'Dwyer, says Labour's proposal is unnecessary. Well, let's get more on this with Victoria Weekes, the chair of the Australian Gender Equality Council. Well, this is where the situation is at the moment. Labour says there's a need to have pay equity be written into the Fair Work Act, make sure that it is enshrined. Kelly O'Dwyer, on the other hand, Federal Minister for Industrial Relations, says that there's really no need for it. What do you think?
Look, in one sense, I don't want to get into the politics of it. I think it's a great first step that we're actually having this kind of discussion on the national agenda. The pay gap, 23% across the board for all pay, is a huge issue and it's really persistent. So I think any initiatives and thinking about what might make those changes really important. I think their suggestion really addresses a key part of the pay gap, or might address that, which is the fact that around 30% of that pay gap is because women predominantly work in lower paid industries. And we have to ask, why is that? Do we really value the work of healthcare workers, nurses, teachers, childcare workers less than we do electricians or mechanics? So pay equity is a really important principle, and some of the constructs that the Fair Work Commission have kind of limited their ability to apply those pay equity principles.
So before we get into the nitty-gritty of it, what is the current process in accordance to the Fair Work Act to ensure equal pay?
Yeah. So the issue around equal pay is legislated in that sense. If you and I do exactly the same job, the law says we're paid the same job. The challenge we have with the Fair Work Commission, and I will confess to saying I'm not an expert in the nitty-gritty, but the challenge we've had in saying there are some industries where actually what we pay as an industry undervalues the work that they do. And so, as I understand it, the constraints that the Fair Work Commission have, in order to say, for example, a childcare worker should be paid more relative to a manufacturing worker, which is what the pay case was about, the constructs and the restraints that the Fair Work Commission have on them now don't actually allow them properly to look at pay equity. It's all about having to find a male comparator. Well, what's a male comparator for a childcare worker? So I think
we have men working in childcare.
Yeah, we do.
As well.
So you're right.
Are they,
regardless of the men and women working in childcare,
are they paid just as
they are paid exactly the same. The point is, we have industries which we'll call what we call feminised. In other words, over history, time immemorial, we've suddenly said that childcare workers, teachers and nurses, the value of their work is lower than others, and we have to take that step back and say, how do we actually value the work of certain people? It's not about paying people unfairly just because they're men or they're women. It is actually about taking a step back and allowing the Fair Work Commission to look at it broadly and say, what is pay equity? What should a skilled childcare worker that has the responsibility to look after our children, the future of the economy, what's the value of the work that they contribute? And I think that's what hasn't been able to occur to date.
Now, the Labour Party says that, they're proposing the appointment of a second Fair Work Commission president. How would this ensure that the Act is
I don't have a view on that, and I can't really comment about that. I think what's most important is to take a really clear look at any constraints on the Commission in terms of what they do, which has probably come out of a historical set of assumptions, and saying, do they have the remit they need to have to ensure that they can contribute to pay equity? As I say, the feminised industries is just one part of the gender pay gap, but it's considered to be significant. And as I said, if you ask most people, you or I or anyone in the street, to say, how do you value, how important is the work of childcare workers, teachers, people in social care and things like that, it's actually quite important to all of us, and yet we don't value it in terms of what we pay them. I would love to see whether it's the Fair Work Commission or a broader study done as saying, what is the actual economic value that we bring to bringing up and educating our children well? And I think that kind of analysis, rather than saying let's compare a childcare worker to a manufacturer or why should they be paid differently, is the right sort of analysis.
So it's valuing the skills and the responsibilities that actually go with the job.
To me, it's skills, responsibilities and the outcome. What is the impact to society and our economy, by the way, and business, if we don't put the right people and value the skills those people have in caring for our kids?
The gender pay gap issue has been around for a very, very long time.
Yes.
Why do you think it hasn't been resolved? What are the obstacles to resolving it?
Well, it's interesting. Again, there's actually now a lot of analysis and said what we've just been talking about is one contributor to the gender pay gap. Another one is the fact that we have industries like financial services, where I'm from, where we actually have 50% women in that industry. But the reality is at the most senior, most highly paid levels, there aren't women. And women have been coming into this industry, that industry, for a long time. So we have to say, well, why is that? When we actually look at the gender pay gap data, it's quite clear. Part of that is coming from actually people in very similar jobs not actually being paid the same, where it's discretion and it's not subject to an award. And so that's around culture and behaviour. Part of it is about organisations making sure that they get equal representation at senior levels by men and women, because we're actually equally capable, not because it's a token appointment. The feminised industries is part of it as well. So there's a whole series of things that contribute to it. But I think partly why it's been so stubborn in terms of changing is that we really haven't invested the time and the effort in thinking about what's causing it, and then we're prepared to change some of the assumptions that we make, and we're prepared to change some of the, I guess, long-established constructs about how we value work, for example.
Victoria Weekes, thank you so much for speaking with us.
Thank you.